Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating piece of source material titled Inquiry from the Cave. It dives deep into African AI policy, digital sovereignty, and asks a massive, absolutely crucial global question: who really controls the most powerful cognitive technology in human history?
So, let's jump right into this with a powerful metaphor from the text. The author brings up Zira Yacob. He was a 17th century Ethiopian philosopher who, while literally hiding in a cave, asked this profound question: how do I know what I know, and whose authority gets to decide what is true? The source argues that this centuries-old question is urgently relevant today, because, well, today, that cave is a data center, and the authority defining truth, it's often a massive AI model trained entirely somewhere else.
Section 1. The compute deficit. To really understand why this is such a pressing issue, we have to look at the physical reality of artificial intelligence. And the crucial point here is this haunting number, less than 1%. That is Africa's entire share of global data center capacity. I mean, think about that. The continent holds 18% of the world's population, yet it controls less than 1% of the physical infrastructure that actually runs modern AI.
The sheer scale of this disparity is just staggering. The source's data shows the United States completely dominating, with roughly 75% of global capacity, while China holds about 15%. It paints a very stark picture of exactly where the physical engines of AI are located right now.
The author frames this as much more than just a missed market opportunity. They call it an epistemic constraint about the geography of the mind. And this raises a pretty uncomfortable truth. The models shaping decisions for African citizens are overwhelmingly trained far away, on foreign data, and in foreign languages. It's all about where thought happens, and ultimately, governed by whose rules.
Section 2. The continental AI strategy.
Okay, so how are policymakers responding to this? The source details the African Union's continental AI strategy, which was endorsed in July 2024. As the text notes, we are currently sitting right in the middle of Phase 1, which spans 2025 to 2026. This phase is heavily focused on establishing governance frameworks and mobilizing resources before the actual execution begins in 2028.
But the explainer's source identifies a major tension here. The strategy is ethically ambitious, and it's Africa-centric in principle, but structurally, it's weak on enforcement. Unlike the European Union, the AU cannot pass binding regulations with severe penalties. And that leaves 54 individual member states essentially on their own, trying to negotiate bilateral deals with these massive global tech giants.
Section 3. The compute question. This structural weakness leads us right to what the source considers the most underappreciated element in these policy debates. We see a clear contrast in global approaches to digital sovereignty. On one hand, you have the Brussels strategy, which relies on strong regulatory market power to force compliance. But the source explicitly highlights the Indian strategy as a highly relevant model for the global south. India recently pushed for a massive 38,000 GPU national compute pool, essentially treating computing power as digital public infrastructure.
The source argues emphatically that true sovereign AI simply cannot exist without sovereign compute. If your physical infrastructure, your GPUs and data centers, are located outside your borders and they're subjected to foreign export controls and terms of service, well, your technological sovereignty is merely leased. You're essentially just renting space from another power.
Section 4. High stakes in healthcare.
Now, to see exactly why this theoretical policy matters in the real world, the source zooms in on a matter of literal life and death. The author uses the example of a rural health worker in Oromia who is relying on an AI clinical decision tool. But wait, that model was likely trained on American medical journals and European hospital data. As the text vividly illustrates, the model has never seen a health post. This creates a really dangerous distributional shift. The model might confidently give the completely wrong medical recommendation because it just doesn't understand the local environment or the seasonal disease prevalence. The author strongly critiques the standard pipeline for how these tools actually get deployed. Currently, a vendor brings a tool, a multilateral funder pays for it, the health ministry provides a deployment site, and then validation often happens concurrently with live patient care. It's a huge structural flaw where data is being extracted and the system is tested on the fly, totally bypassing strict upfront validation.
To fix this pipeline, the source impartially lists 6 rigorous requirements that health ministries absolutely must demand to safely integrate AI tools. These include prospective local validation before launch, strict post-market auditability of the model's behavior in the field, and contractual data sovereignty so the local health system actually owns the data it generates. This is especially vital today amid tightening global donor funding pressures, where AI is frequently pushed simply as a cost-saving measure.
Section 5. A blueprint for sovereignty. Building on all of these critiques, the source moves into a very direct 10-point policy blueprint for African governments in 2026. The first half focuses heavily on foundational structures. The recommendations advise governments to adopt the AU strategy as a baseline, pass GDPR-style data protection laws, and designate strict deployment authorities. Crucially, it recommends pooling compute resources regionally because, let's face it, individual states really can't build massive data centers all on their own. It also stresses heavily funding local AI research.
Moving to the second half of the blueprint, the push here is for radical independence. The text argues that the continent needs to leverage its unique philosophical traditions, like Ubuntu, to actively shape global AI governance. It also highlights the urgent need to address severe labor disruptions, keeping in mind Africa's massive 19-year-old median age. Most importantly, it urges policymakers to flat-out refuse the framing of merely being an AI recipient. The argument is that they must shape the governments rather than just consuming the product.
Because if they don't, the result is captured perfectly in this powerful quote from the source. The alternative is a continent of AI tenants paying rent indefinitely. This perfectly distills the exact risk of failing to build that physical and intellectual infrastructure. It ultimately leads to permanent technological tenancy. Connecting right back to our opening metaphor, the source reimagines Plato's cave to frame this core issue. The prisoners in the cave aren't lacking intellectual capability, right? Their chains are simply on the structure of their access. For the global south, the text argues the constraint isn't a lack of reasoning. It's a structural lack of access to the light, which today literally means raw data and compute power.
Ultimately, the source leaves us with this really profound question. Will Africa remain just a consumer of foreign AI, interpreting shadows cast by others? Or will it build the structural access needed to dictate its own technological truth and step out of the cave entirely? It's a massive challenge that will definitely shape the global power dynamics of the next century. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.